culture tells us a bunch of lies about femininity, right? That being feminine is synonymous with like weakness and being less than, and we just have to be more like men in order to thrive and be happy. And Brett Cooper recently released a video about her own journey into embracing femininity. She makes incredible points that I think are very applicable to you and to the culture at large, and I am just pumped to get to react to them and talk to you about them. So let's get to it.
I'm Brett Cooper. So I think you guys probably know that I have been a tomboy for most of my life. But as I've gotten older, I have intentionally been trying to tap into my feminine side. And if 14-year-old Brett heard me say that, I think that she would literally die. I think she would fall out of her chair and puke and be angry at me, whatever it is. Because I genuinely believed that femininity either meant that you were weak or docile, or that you were overtly promiscuous and sexual, and those were the only two options that I saw for my community and influences. Hence why I chose to hang out.
Starting with that is a lie from the pit of hell. These two dramatic sides of femininity that you're either like weak and less than and being trampled all over, or you're using your feminine, like the beauty of your femininity in a promiscuous way, and that gives you some sort of power. And I hear her. I don't know how old she is, but she's like younger than me. Like I think like she's been raised with like similar voices of cultural voices of like these two really jarring ideas of femininity. And there's not a discussion of like middle ground femininity. I personally think that that is because there is such beauty in femininity that the enemy who hates all beauty hates femininity and is trying to thwart it. Probably a conversation for another time. But I did just want to voice that this like dichotomy is actually very common in so many people's hearts, and it's a lie. Okay, go.
Fast forward to now, a lot has changed. And over the years, I finally realized that my inherent femininity as a woman is a gift. And it is something that I should not be totally rejecting as I did in my teen years. But as somebody who grew up in a very turbulent household and had a very unconventional childhood where I was moved around a lot, and, there was a lot of back and forth, you do become hardened. And as you become hardened, you do become more masculine. You put your walls up. You are not as emotional. I did have that mentality that was like, I don't need anybody else. I don't want anybody else around me, because usually when I have other people around me, they screw things up and they make my life harder. Like that was how
I don't think that I had ever made the connection between that like kind of less emotional, like hardness of heart as being more masculine. I mean, authentic masculinity, as defined by the person of Christ, actually doesn't have walls up and actually is emotional. Like Christ had a lot of emotions, including weeping multiple different times. I don't think that a soft heart and feeling your emotions is either masculine or feminine. I think it's human, and I think all humans should do it. But I do find it interesting that she equated that hardening and that shutting down with being more masculine. Because I do think culturally speaking, men are expected to feel less and emote less. And so women, when they emote a lot and are then like torn down for emoting a lot, swing the pendulum. The point that I want to make, though, is that all people, the softness of heart, the feeling emotions is just a human thing. It's not either masculine or feminine. Women express it differently than men, but the core of feeling it is both. But I do find it fascinating that she attributed that like shutting down to like the childhood trauma and the chaos and the things that make a childhood unsafe for a child to grow and thrive. And so she embraced in her mind more masculine traits of like shutting down. Whew. Such insight, Brett Cooper. Okay.
But I also want to stop shutting men out, because in my experience, I wanted to be one of the guys. I just wanted to be friends with guys, but I did not want them to look at me in any way other than just being one of the guys. It was hard to, break down those walls and go, okay, well, I'm straight. I'm getting to the point where I want to date. I need to be comfortable with a guy looking at me like that and perceiving. It's just so, it feels so weird. And you might be saying, Brett, this is a really weird dichotomy. Talk to a woman. I'm sure it exists in her head if she's been here.
I want to be a girl.
Okay. She is so brave. She is so brave when public figures like put their heart out on their platforms and like talk about the feelings they're feeling. Girl, if you or someone on our team is watching this, like hats off to you. You are so brave. Thank you so much for your courage. To be able to like express this feeling that I think a lot of people feel. And I think from a femininity perspective, but I think also from like a purity culture perspective, I think there is a lot of like, shut down, don't do it, it's bad, it's dirty, it's whatever, like your femininity, your sexuality, like whatever it is. And I think when you get to a certain point and you're like, wait, hold on, I want to challenge those beliefs because I want to be making choices that like in her situation, right? She was like, I'm straight. I want to get married one day, which means I'm going to have someone look at me and I'm going to have a man want to desire me, but I don't know how to be in that space and have him desire me in a way that like, I don't know how to do that, right? Like, oh, that takes so much courage. And I am sure there are so many of you who are feeling that. And I just want to give you permission to feel it, because like when you're transitioning away from kind of a mindset that's maybe not the most helpful or maybe not the most rooted in truth, it takes a lot of courage to like get out of that comfort zone. But on the other side of that comfort zone is where freedom is, right? And I don't know where she's going, but I think she's probably going there, that like when she had the courage to like, boom, bust out of that, that's where like true freedom started to come. So
now somebody commented and said, I think in an effort to avoid being sexualized or infantilized, a lot of us neglected feminine things and now feel uncomfortable being womanly. And that was literally me. Like, that is what I said at the beginning in that introduction. Like, it took a come to Jesus conversation with me and my mom when I was about 16 years old. We were in the car. I remember we were coming over the hill. I know exactly where all these conversations were because they just stick in my mind. Like, that, again, I can't even describe it. Like, that is how stark of a transition this has been in my life. But I remember sitting there with her, and it took that conversation for me to start thinking differently about all of this, because I felt constantly sexualized in Hollywood. I was surrounded by girls who made that their whole identity and their personality, and they loved that and they leaned into that, and I wanted to be anything but that. I hated it. I was so uncomfortable. And I did not see a way that I could merge the two without becoming an object and losing all the things that I thought were great about myself. And it took a long time to figure out that I could do that. I'm still figuring it out every single day. Somebody commented and
this is where I thought she was going with this. So there is kind of a song that I think a lot of women's hearts sing, that is, I would rather be used than ignored. And I think when women recognize that they are being objectified and sexualized and like lusted after, they either have two responses. They go the way I just said, like, I'd rather be used than ignored. So all these women that she's saying in Hollywood that like embraced it and leaned into it, I imagine that deep in their heart, they hated it. They liked the attention, but they hated like how their dignity was being violated, because none of us can stand our dignity being violated. Like, it's anti-human nature to be okay with that. But the attention maybe, and the roles and the parts and the money and whatever else, fame, whatever else came with it. But then you have the other response, which is what Brett did, which is like, just shut it down. And I think that there are a lot of women who take the route Brett took, but then even take it farther, right? Like completely rejecting their femininity as a whole, completely rejecting the advances of men as a whole, finding other women to be safer, maybe even romantically, or finding women's, like your feminine body to be so dangerous, you just have to escape it and embrace a different body, right? Like, I think you can see a lot of the agony in our culture that comes from this misunderstanding of femininity. And now, obviously, there's a lot more to those stories that are outside the scope of this video. But I do think that if you follow the line of thinking that Brett's talking about, that is the natural end of the line of thinking, like a total rejection of the feminine body and a total rejection of romantic love with men at all. But I think that there's something real to be said about how beautiful it is to find that middle ground. There is a beauty and a goodness to the feminine body, and it has been ruthlessly attacked in our culture. And it's amazing how when women are recognizing like, okay, I don't want to give in to the lusty side and I don't want to give in to the rejecting femininity side, like there has to be another answer, the freedom that comes from that, the ability for a woman to embrace, like there's goodness to being a woman here. And I think too, the beauty that men are recognizing, like women aren't just an object for my sexual lust, like there's a beauty and a dignity to them that stirs in his heart like a masculine desire to like protect and provide. And like there's just this beautiful harmony. We know that that comes from God, that God's design of masculinity and femininity is such that like the two have such a beautiful role to play in communicating who God is and communicating what it means to be authentically happy. But I also think just in a woman herself, there's a freedom that comes with being able to recognize like I can embrace my femininity. And that doesn't mean I'm going to have to be oppressed or lusted after. I can just be free to enjoy the goodness and the beauty of being a woman. And later in the video, this wasn't one of the clips that my producer pulled, but in the video, at some point, she talks about the beauty of like wearing sundresses and like how lovely and feminine it feels to be wearing dress that's specific for women. Obviously, you don't have to do that to like embrace femininity, but there is something beautiful about those pieces of femininity expressed with the body, that does lend this like beautiful lightness to your narrative. So in conclusion, I loved that. I hope you liked it. If you liked these more longer form reactions where I respond to multiple things, leave a note in the comments. We look at them all, so we can definitely use that feedback. But man, this is such an important conversation. I'm glad that Brett had the courage to have it. I hope that you guys are able to have the courage to have it in your own circles, in your own life, in your own heart. And until next time, stay close to the heart of Jesus and be not afraid. Bye.